It is good to see everybody here in person. It's great to see that we have a big crowd today. I'm super excited for our speaker. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to hand off to Jared, one of our board members, to go ahead and introduce our speaker today.
Good morning, friends of First Fridays. Appreciate everybody coming out. The month of November is a good time that First Fridays likes to support our military. So we have our special guest today who has over 20 years experience in the military, a true servant leader and a battle-proven leader. She's currently at the 122nd Fighter Wing with a lot of experience that I can't even go into. So I'm hoping that she is able to touch on that today. Being a servant leader in the community, she also is the founder of a nonprofit called Mission Arrow Pipeline, who helps at-risk youth in the aerospace and STEM education. With that, she puts a lot of time and effort, and she has a strong passion. As I got to talk to her this morning, I'm really excited about hearing what she has to say about leadership. And is that all? No, of course not. She is also looking to help and support our Hoosier veterans by running for Congress. So please put your hands together for Jennifer-Ruth Romper Green.
Good morning, everyone. I will just say a quick plug. I am not running against Representative Jim Banks. He is a solid friend, a good man. He does a good work for this district. I actually live in District 1, Indiana 01, in the northwest side of town, or the northwest side of the state. So Jim Banks is doing a great job. He doesn't need me to say that, but he is, in my opinion. So we just have a quick video to share a little bit of history. Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate the introduction, and then I'll come right back up. Well, my name is Lieutenant Colonel Jennifer-Ruth Green, and it's an honor to be here today. I do first want to thank the guests that are with me. Liz on the far right, if you'd raise your hand. Without her, I wouldn't be here because she's my scheduler. She's my assistant, and she told me this is where I need to be today. And she said, do you have your wallet? Do you have your keys? Do you have your speech? Do you have everything? And so courtesy to Liz, we are here. And in the front row, it's kind of weird. I have this fan club. They follow me wherever I go. They say, can I wear what you're going to wear? I want to dress like you. And so these are them. No, these are my teammates at the 122nd. My chief, senior enlisted advisor is Chief Gent. And then one of our senior enlisted leaders, Master Sergeant Chris Spurgeon. And then Staff Sergeant Jacob Emmerich, who will soon be Second Lieutenant Emmerich and become our Director of Operations. So I'm really grateful for them today as well. Thank you, Jerry and Jim, for the opportunity to be here and the work that you guys do in the community. When I sat here today thinking about leadership, right, there were a couple of different ideas that kind of came through. Like, what are we going to talk about? And I know, my first thought initially was, let's talk through maybe the 5 pieces of leadership or the 5 leadership principles that I have. And then I thought, what, everybody has their own individual interpretation of leadership, but specifically considering the military side, what is it that would be, I would say, most unique to me in my military experiences that may be relatable? And so today I want to talk about battle-proven leadership. Battle-proven leadership. Battle-proven leadership is a concept to me that discusses the primary foundational imperative that leaders must be willing to fight for their people. And we all know that. Leaders must be willing to fight to take care of their people. But I think for me, one of the biggest things that I didn't understand was the breadth of who encompassed that group of people for whom I was fighting. And my question started in the summer of 2009. In the summer of 2009, I was working as a special agent with the Air Force Office of Special Investigations. And I was a young captain, and it was my responsibility to deploy to Baghdad, Iraq. So stateside, my responsibilities as an agent, I was an Air Force officer, but my responsibilities were to investigate felony crimes with an Air Force nexus. So we were talking murders and burglaries and central systems fraud and all those kinds of things. And so as we were sitting there doing all of those things, interrogations, asking questions, that was my life. And so then they said, all right, it's time for us to go downrange. We're a country that's at war in Afghanistan and Iraq, and we have an assignment for you. You're going to Baghdad. And so we went for extensive training, and we went for training for about a year. I went to a course called Evasion and Conduct after capture, and we went to Washington, and they taught us how to conduct ourselves in the face of the enemy and ultimately how to return with honor. They talked to us about how we could escape. They talked to us about methodologies. They talked about what, they talked with us about what to expect so we could prepare our families. And then we also did a lot of training of running and gunning and shooting and figuring out how to get more fit. And there was a sign on the wall that said, right now, your enemy could be training harder than you. And that pushed us. And so we're getting prepped and ready to go on our assignment. And my task downrange is to recruit and vet spies so that we can further American interests. And so that's what I went to do. And so we get to Baghdad, but in 2005, I graduated from the United States Air Force Academy. And right before I left, there were a couple of distinct tragedies that really stuck out to me. Right before I had come to Baghdad, well, actually a couple years before, there was a man named Special Agent Matthew Kuglix. And Matt, his job, same job, downrange, recruit and vet spies. And unfortunately, Matt was killed in action due to an improvised explosive device that the enemy detonated. And Matt lost his life. I remember going to his funeral and meeting his parents, and they were incredibly loving and kind, and Matt was a good guy. And so Matt had lost his life. And when I was in college at the academy, there was a young lady behind me a couple of years. Her name was First Lieutenant at this point when she passed away, Rosalind Schulte. So she graduated, became an intelligence officer. She was my friend, one of the brightest people I'd ever met, one of the greatest minds I'd ever known. And she was so kind, and she did such a good job, and she was such a good leader. And Roz, she passed away because she was killed in action by an IED as well. And then Captain Mark Mcdowell. Mark had this smile that just lit his face. He smiled to his ears, and you saw all of his molars. That was Mark. Mark was an F-15E pilot, and he actually was flying in combat. And due to some miscommunication and his willingness to be the airman that we knew he was, willing to help anyone out at any given moment, Mark was killed in action when his plane crashed into a mountain. So Mark and Matt and Roz, I remember thinking, you know what? It's my turn to go to war, and I'm fighting for Matt and Mark and Roz. These are people that I know. I know them. There's a quote that's attributed to George Orwell, and it says, people sleep peaceably in their beds at night because rough men stand ready to do violence on their behalf. And it's such an interesting thought because I think my first thought was, well, someone has been keeping war at bay. My family has had the opportunity to go to sleep at night and rest well. My family has had the opportunity to have infrastructure because no one's bombed the streets around our place. We can go to the hospital because the hospital is still standing. Our government still has the ability to operate. We can put money out. We can still have safe elections. We can do each and every one of these things because people stood and kept violence at bay. And so now it's merely my turn to exchange. And it's time for my friends, my colleagues, the people that I stood next to at the academy for 4 years. We did blood, sweat, and tears. We did push-ups. We worked out together, all of those things. And they've deployed once already, and now it's their time to come home and sleep peaceably in their beds. And now it's my time to do rough violence on their behalf. So I went to war, I went to combat, and I went for people I know. My academy classmates, I went for Mark, I went for Roz, and I went for Matt. And when I got to Baghdad, it was a unique experience. First of all, I'm from California, I love sunshine, but it was 129 in the shade. And I was like, oh, it's a little bit uncomfortable here. But somebody said one time, they're like, it feels like the sun is blowing on your face. And I was like, that's so accurate. That's so accurate. But here we are, we're in Baghdad, and we're conducting our missions, and I got the chance to serve as a mission commander outside the wire, we call it, outside the wired fence. And so we would go outside the wire and complete these missions, and I remember 5 distinct times where I knew that God had kept me alive, and I didn't necessarily know the specific purpose, but I knew I was still here. And so one day we sent out the team out, and they went to an undisclosed location to pick up one of our sources. And we brought him back, and he was working with us, and I had the opportunity to sit across from him. And he began to share his story with me. And he told me how he'd been working with the Americans for years. He had spent time with us providing information so that we could effectively meet our objectives. And he talked about how several years earlier, he had all of his credentials on him, and he spoke English, and so he would teach English to help other people because he felt, as we're continuing to serve in his country, it would be wise for people to learn. So he was an English teacher, but Al-Qaeda Iraq had gotten his name and figured that, hey, this guy's working for the Americans. So he heard they were looking for him, and he was able to ditch all of his identifying paperwork, but at the same time, he got kidnapped. And for 3 days, he was tortured and he was questioned. And they said, "We know you're working for the Americans." And he said, no, I'm just an English teacher. He's like, check my pockets, check everything. He's like, I just teach English. Well, you speak English and you're meeting with them. They had no idea, but you're meeting with them and we know. And he just said, no, I'm just an English teacher. So battered and bruised, after 3 days, he was finally returned to his family because they bought his story. And then he told me a couple years later where AQI, Al-Qaeda Iraq, had gotten hold of them again. And they said, I know he's working for them. We're going to go get him. So one morning, mid-morning, after a study session, his daughter's returning to her house after a study session with one of her teenage girlfriends. She's kidnapped and she's taken by AQI, and they tell her father, here's a ransom requirement and you will pay this if you want to ever see your daughter again. So he comes to us frantic and he says, hey, they have my daughter and we need to get her back. And so we said, all right, we're going to figure out where she is. So took the intel, figured out the spot, used some of our other sources, and we obviously didn't want to make sure that the source who told us would be so easily connected. So the operators who were going to operate on that particular mission said, we're going to catch a bunch of different doors. We're going to go to various places and make it look like we're just doing a general raid in the area due to some intelligence. And so, of course, they started in the area where she was, and they were knocking on doors, and they were striving to find out where she was. And the kidnappers said, hey, they're coming. It's wiser for us to just put her out, because if we do, then they won't know where we are, and then she's going to tell them what we did and all kinds of things. So they just kicked her out. And after 7 days, she was finally reunited with her dad. And I sat across from him and I heard these stories and I said, why do you do this? Why do you risk your life and your family's life so that Americans can achieve their military objectives? And he said, because I believe in a better Iraq. He said, and I believe that Americans can help us. And I thought, wow, I am here because I'm fighting for Roz and for Matt and for Mark. And you believe in a bigger scope. You believe in a better country. Quick parenthetical, when I came back, I remember people would say, thank you for your service. And I would nod and I would smile and I would be appreciative. But in the back of my mind, I would think Roz, Mark, and Matt. But I was very appreciative, but it wasn't quite the same to me. And so going back in, I remember sitting across from him, hearing his words and thinking, wow, what a perspective. And it helped me process, because not only was I responsible to fight for the people that I know, but also the people that I don't know. And there were tons, millions of Iraqis that I didn't know, but who deserved something better. And he believed that they were worth fighting for. And so he was willing to give everything up to and including his life because he believed in something far greater. So I came back from combat. And like I said, I was grateful that I was safe, but there were still some nagging questions. People ask me about combat often, and I say, war is the ugliest thing I've ever been a part of. And I say, war changes you for good. I don't necessarily know whether it's for the better. I still find, I'm still answering that question every day, but I do know that it changes me for a long time. And so war has continued to impact me. But as I continued to progress, one of the things that I thought about was, did I make a difference? What did I do and did it matter? And so a couple of years ago, I was sitting in a church service and there was a pastor from Iraq who had come over to the States and was just talking, raising some support and talking a little bit about the reports of the money that had been given and just sharing what he'd been doing with it. And so he stands up in the church and our pastor invites him to the pulpit to be able to share a little bit about what's going on. And he starts just by breaking down. And he just cries and he cries. And then finally, he's able to compose himself for a second. And he just says, I want to thank America. He said, I want to thank America, for without you, I would not have had the opportunity to worship freely. He said, I grew up in a dictatorship. Saddam Hussein was our leader at the time, and everyone was a Muslim. And this is the way that I choose to worship, and now I have the opportunity to do so. He said, we started some radio programs, and now we're able to take those radio programs and share the gospel around with the Arab world. And it's such an honor, and I just wanted to say thank you. And I didn't realize that I was holding anything in at the time, but I remember just this big guttural sigh. It was this sigh of maybe relief. It was this sigh of maybe, wow, maybe this sigh that God would use me in this way. It was just an incredible time for me because I didn't realize that there was so much I had yet to understand. And so I had fought for the people that I knew, Matt and Roz and Mark. And then the people that I didn't know, all the Iraqis that sat around me. But then I also fought for people that didn't know me. I would have never met this guy. I would have never met any of the people that he's had the opportunity to touch. And he would never know my name, except I introduced myself to him afterwards. But he would never know my name apart from that. And that's the thought today. As a leader, having been in combat, I realized through my journey that it was my responsibility to fight very specifically. First of all, we know that as a leader, we must fight for our people. It is our requirement. But where does that scope start and end? As leaders in this room, regardless of whatever level you are, it is your responsibility to fight for people. Fight for the people that you know. Maybe those are the people that are sitting across from you. Maybe those are the people that work alongside you. If it's been a long week and people need to take time off, fight for that. If someone on your team needs more maternity leave or needs to have just another day where they can just rest because they've been go, 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 notice that as a leader and fight for that and fight for them. But fight for the people you don't know. Fight for the person who doesn't have a placard that says parking spot for so-and-so. Fight for the person that's getting minimum wage at your company. Fight for the people who don't have the opportunity to sit in the room and fight for themselves. That's our responsibility as leaders. Fight for those you know. Fight for those you don't know. Fight for those that don't know you. 50 years from now at your company, who knows who will remember your name? But if you create a policy, maybe there's a lactation room, maybe there's maternity leave that gets extended, maybe paternity leave is started, maybe there's something that you put into place that's more ADA compliant. Maybe there's something that you enacted that changed the way that people who don't know you will operate. Leaders fight for their people. And today, there are 3 very specific things. As leaders, you must fight for people you know. Rod, Matt, Mark. Fight for those you don't know. The Iraqis that I had the responsibility of extending my requirement in my life for. Fight for those you don't know. That Iraqi pastor who stood and said, thank you, because without your willingness to fight, I wouldn't have the opportunity to do what I do now. As leaders, we must be responsible for battle-proven leadership. Thank you.
wow just came out of your mouth, but it did mine when I did that. I kind of wish I lived in District 1. That was incredible. I've got a quick question.
Sure.
Oh, turn it on. All right.
Would you like me to come here? Would you like to stay?
You can come up here because we're going to ask some questions. Because I like this plane. Did you fly the A-10 Warthog?
I don't fly the A-10 Warthog. I don't. Just the T-37.
Oh, just. I drive a Mazda. So.
Same.
I just wonder. That's one of we see those flying around here, and
they're amazing.
Yeah, they are. That's incredible. Boy, there's a lot of things that came to my mind on that. I love those points that you made. Be willing to fight for people. You probably in your workplace, you see things that doesn't seem to be right, and sometimes it's just easy not to say anything, and then sometimes you speak up and say, well, wait a minute, something needs to happen, and sometimes that comes at risk. Sometimes it opens eyes, and you get a perspective, or the company gets a perspective they've never gotten before. So I love that. So I love that. And I'm going to change one of the other things that you said. You talked about our enemies, but in the business world, our competitors may be training or preparing harder than we are. Sure. That should scare us if we're in a competitive market, because it's easy just to kind of coast. It's easy to kind of say, hey, we're doing the thing. We're great. But our competitors are working just as hard, sometimes harder, preparing, bringing on technology, developing their people a little bit better. And that could change everything for your company tomorrow. So I'd be thinking about that. I love that. I also love, believe in a better country. I'm glad you were able to hear that from the Iraqis, but I'm hoping we all feel that way. Believe in a better community, believe in a better company. I love what's happens here in Northeast Indiana, and especially when we have leaders like this that can come in and challenge us to that. So I know you said it in such a way, but I want to thank you for your service, all you guys here too.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to connect today. It's been an honor. I'll be around for a while. Would love to shake your hand. I really appreciate the invitation. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much. That was awesome. My cup got filled this morning. I hope all of yours did as well. So yeah, please stay around. As we say at First Fridays, come for the leadership development. The networking is on you. So we got a chance to have some extra time here. So come up and meet any of these other fine folks in uniform up here. If you don't know somebody and I don't know what this network, it's not a matter of just handing a business card, and that's, find out who they are, what do they do, ask them, what does leadership look like in your company? Or what have you been learning during this pandemic, or whatever, so make some meaningful connections. And maybe as you talk, thinking, okay, I don't have enough time, invite them out to coffee. People, as I always say, people will talk for coffee. Wayne Robbins is a great one on that. People will talk for coffee and they'll talk for food. So continue the networking, because we live in a great part of the state where networking is very much alive and well. So start that today and then continue that on. Again, thank you very much. Remember, we're back again the first Friday of next month, and we go all the way until May. So if you haven't checked it out, check out our website. Follow us on LinkedIn if you're not doing that. Follow us on YouTube. This presentation will be out there fairly soon. Share it with people. You never know who's going to end up seeing that and coming. So thanks so much for coming out on a chilly morning. Have a great day.